Okay, so I think we're in good shape here. We got 56 people. It's almost 7:10. I think I'll read your bio here, Vern. Okay, our presenter, Vern Fish, is a former executive director of the Black Hawk County Conservation Board in Waterloo, Iowa. He serves on the board of directors for the Iowa National Heritage Foundation Board and the Conservation Corps of Iowa and Minnesota. He is currently the president of the Friends of the Wabakimi and an advocate for clean water. He serves as an elected commissioner on the Black Hawk Soil and Water Conservation District. A passionate paddler, he has run wild rivers from South America to the Mexican border and north to the Arctic Circle, with stops at Hudson Bay. So welcome, Vern.
All right, let's see if we can get this thing up and going. All right, well, we'll see how this goes forward. As Gary, I guess what I'd like to point out, begin with, the program is the Greenmantle, but it's also a cooperative effort of the Wilderness Canoe Association and the Friends of Wabakimi. So we're going to give you credit for it, but I also want a little credit for my organization. And let's see if I can do the advance here. And you've already pointed out who I am, so I don't need to go back through that. But I would like to just share a little poem with you here. This is I think the reason all of us paddle. There's a magic in the feel of the paddle and the movement of a canoe. A magic compounded by distance, adventure, solitude, and peace by Sigurd Olson. And that ability to get in a boat and make it go for 100 or 200 or 300 miles and live off what you brought with you, I think is part of the magic of wilderness canoeing. And that's kind of the reason I'm doing it. And I think that's probably why you do it. And so the Greenmantle is a river in Wabakimi, and it's a little Wabakimi gem. And I think it's a great example of being able to just disappear into a remote area and find your way from start to end. Wabakimi maybe comes from a word that refers to white water, or the sheet is white. It's also the home of the woodland caribou. In fact, it was created to provide a protected area for woodland caribou. For those who are not familiar with where it's at, it is north of the Boundary Waters, north of Quetico. Woodland caribou it's actually east of woodland caribou. And the reason I point out Polar Bear Provincial Park is, as you know, that's the largest provincial park in Ontario. And we'll talk about the comparison to Wabakimi. It's north of Thunder Bay. Actually, the gateway city, Armstrong, is 3 hours north of Thunder Bay. And how far is it? I always find this interesting. Thunder Bay to Armstrong is 3 hours. It is 17 hours west of Waterloo, Ontario. It is 10.5 hours east of Winnipeg, and it's only 12 hours for me from Waterloo, Iowa. And so the irony of that is it's a shorter drive for a guy in Iowa than it is for somebody in Southern Ontario. And that's why there's a lot of us lower 48ers that are up there paddling, because it's not much further than paddling up to the Quetico or the Boundary Water. So that's why the organization, the Friends of Wabakimi, is about 50-50 Canadian and US because of that distance factor. It is the second largest park in the system. Polar Bear Provincial Park is the largest. It was created in 1983, and in 1997, it was expanded dramatically. I think the map on the lower right shows the original in 83 and then what was added in 97. It protects cultural and natural resources and its prime woodland caribou habitat. That's a big part of what it was purchased for, was to protect woodland caribou. It encompasses over 10,000 lakes and networks of rivers and streams. Minnesota is always boasting that it's the state of 10,000 lakes. Well, this park has 10,000 lakes. World-class wilderness canoeing opportunities, 2,000 kilometers of routes. 700 paddlers would be generous. There's probably less than 400 or 500. You have a better chance of seeing a caribou than you probably do of seeing another paddler. Surrounded by Crown land, which includes portions of 5 forest management units, and the Crown land provides access to 6 other provincial parks and 3 conservation reserves. And here's a list of them, and I'll show those in a little bit. But I think when you include all the Crown land and the other provincial parks, it's an area of about 10,000 square miles, which is big enough to swallow the state of Vermont or Prince Edward Island 5 times. It is just a huge area when you include all the public space. And then just a quick summary here. Here's the Albany, Crown lands in white. There's the Bright Sand, Kopka, Ottertooth, Gull River, White Sand, Mojet, and then that's the Atwood. So just kind of give you a sense, it's like that area north of Lake Nipigon and south of the Albany River. Again, we did this trip back in 2019. Nearest city is Armstrong. We put in at Greenmantle Lake and took out on the Albany. Water levels were normal. We had 2 Royal X boats, which, try and buy a Royal X today. Thank God those are indestructible boats and they came in handy on this trip. Matisse Lake Outfitters in Armstrong has provided the air service. Distance was only 75 miles. This isn't a long trip. And from a difficulty standpoint, this is an intermediate. It offers long, twisting technical rapids and numerous log jams. Some pretty spectacular scenery, and then that gives you an example of some of the log jams. The crew, it's an all Iowa crew. Dan, well, I lied, 1 Minnesotan, and you mentioned Dan Otto already. Dan is from North Branch, Minnesota. Ray is from Iowa City. Hank is from Spencer, Iowa. And again, I'm from Waterloo, Iowa. Just a quick sense, so where the trip went, there was Armstrong, and we flew into Greenmantle, and we worked our way down the Greenmantle to the Shabasquaya. And then we went down to the Albany, and then out to St. Andrew Chapel on the Minnesota Lake. This is what the Greenmantle looks like, and there's the Greenmantle Lake. It's a wild little river. It may lack girth and length, but it's long on adventure and isolation, hidden in the far northwest corner of Wabakimi Provincial Park. So this is there's no roads up here. It's a huge swath of protected boreal wilderness, and so you really get a sense of isolation in this little corner. I'm going to show you our planning map. There is Armstrong. There is the Greenmantle. And I show you this little corner because our planning maps that we produce also include the topo maps that if you want to order the map, in this case, 52P6 and 52P3. So the planning maps that the Friends of Wabakimi produce help you figure out which topographic map you need in the Canadian system. And so there are the maps that we use for the trip. I actually use yellow maps for my mapping source. There are other sources, but that's pretty convenient because it's already digitized. And it's in the yellow map, it's zone 52. The Friends of Wabakimi sell maps, and the 2 volumes that were used here are volume 2 and volume 4. The problem, volume 2 does not provide information on the Greenmantle. Volume 4 only provided it from the Mishnekaw River portage to the Shabasquaya and down to the Patty Lake and onto the Albany, and did not cover the upper part of didn't provide any details on the Greenmantle down to the Mishnekaw portage. And then the other piece that I thought was kind of frustrating, and this is out of my Canadian parks. The park superintendent, he said he had flew into Greenmantle, and this is quite a few years ago, and all he could tell was that there was no route between Greenmantle and Suzanne Lake. The imagery bears this out. He said it was just a big bunches of swamp at the end of Greenmantle Lake. So that was kind of disconcerting, is that, maybe there isn't anything there. So there's the planning challenges. There's no trip. I found no trip reports on that stretch from the Greenmantle down to the Mishnekaw portage. Park superintendent said it was just a big wetland. Volume 4 of our map provides information only for the lower half. And I could see on Google Map, which is the modern miracle that we have now, you can literally look on satellite and see what's going on. I can see rapids, bluffs, and plot them on the existing topo map. So I had that advantage. And on that when you look on satellite, it looks like the water coming out of the Greenmantle was over a waterfall. I thought it was the Greenmantle Canyon, so I had no idea what to expect when we got there, and we were somewhat pleasantly surprised it wasn't a canyon. Oh, my images didn't pop up. All right. So this is the normal stuff, logistics. We met in North Branch, Minnesota, repack everything. You guys know the drill here. Drive on up to Armstrong, spent the night at Matisse Outfitters, loaded our stuff into an otter, and off we flew to Greenmantle Lake. Landed at Greenmantle, and then immediately we find a dock. So we know there's been people here. But the problem is, and I think this is an ongoing problem in the Wabakimi area, there's an awful lot of structures and outpost cabins that, whether they've been abandoned or just ignored, it's not uncommon. This one looks like it's been ignored for a long time. To be honest, it looks like it needs to be cleaned up, but that's a whole nother discussion. And if the land use permit is still valid, it's awkward for the park staff to go in and clean it up. But you find this a lot clear in the Northwest Ontario. It's not unusual to find structures that have not been maintained. And this one definitely had that. So there's where the abandoned hunting camp was. We also found 3 pretty good campsites on the island on Greenmantle. And if you can see down here in the lower left, we actually were seeing portage blazes on the trees. So there's been people that have gone out of this lake in the past. And it's a pretty little lake. It was well worth the trip just to see Greenmantle Lake. The portage out, there was nothing obvious there other than we found the portage blaze. So it hadn't been used in a really long time, wasn't maintained. It was almost as if there was no portage there. And so what we did was we just went down the stream and went over the logs as we found them and worked our way down because that was easier than trying to blaze a portage. Yeah, well, relatively easier. So this is the big mystery, this stretch from Greenmantle down to Suzanne Lake. And it was filled with logs and bluffs and more logs and all kinds of obstacles. It was a challenge, but it was a beautiful little body of water. And we brought the right tools and we brought the right people. Everybody was patient. We just worked our way down. It was actually kind of fun. As we moved down the river on the map, it looked like there was a topographic change on the map. And I thought it was just a map error, but it really wasn't. It became noticeably narrower and much rockier at this point. So there was actually a change. It went from a meandering stream to kind of a drop, and that had its own mystery and fun to it. Wildlife, we were seeing swans. Dan Otto was very effective at catching walleye. We found some, what I thought were just monster brook trout. Again, in Iowa, we have brook trout, but they're about 6 inches long. We have nothing like this. So this was a huge thing for me. I caught 2 and quit. Didn't need to catch any more. We saw moose, and we also saw a bear. I don't have a photograph of that. When we got to Suzanne Lake, we found another camp, and we just took advantage of it. And again, this has not been used in a really long time. So whoever's running this, that equipment's out there, but it's not being really maintained. It worked out pretty well for us. It gave us basically a picnic table, but nobody's been there in a really long time. We got an email from our outfitter, Don Elliott. Congratulations, you've made it to Suzanne Lake. You should now have completed the most difficult portion of the trip. And to his knowledge, nobody else had done that stretch before. I'm sure somebody's done it, but not in recent memory. When I posted this trip report on canoeing.com, I got a response from Rod. And so obviously other people have been here in the past, and he hadn't been there in a long time, but he'd done a lot of fishing and hunting on the Greenmantle River and Suzanne Lake. So there's been people there, but it hasn't been used recently. And again, I'm guessing they're there to catch the brook trout. This is the second portage around Suzanne, coming out of Suzanne Lake. Beautiful little stretch of water. and that's where we caught the brook trout. Lots of shoot, line, and wades. You can shoot them, you can run them, or you can wade them, and we did all those combinations. That's what made it kind of fun. The portage from the Cow. In 2016, Hank and I had paddled on the Cow, and we had stopped at, we actually saw the portage blazes. We knew there was a portage there, but we could not find a pathway. If anybody had been going across that portage from the Cow drainage into the Greenmantle, they hadn't done it in recent memory, because there was just nothing there. So we were real curious what we were going to see when we got to that same portage from the Greenmantle side. And it's well marked. There's all kinds of blazes, marks. In fact, it even says PT, Portage Trail, I'm assuming. So this has obviously been a well-used route at some point in time, but not in the recent history, because there just isn't any evidence in the middle. There's lots of blazes on both ends, but it hasn't been, nobody has cleared the route in between in a long time. The confluence, it's a beautiful little corner, but the confluence of the Greenmantle and the Shabasquaya. Again, in 2016, Hank and I had paddled and lined up the Shabasquaya, which was quite an adventure. And we found this 519-meter portage, walked across it, walked down to the confluence, and found a campsite. So we knew what to expect when we got there. And it made a perfect home for us. There was a fire pit, which nobody had used in a long time. So it was a great little place to stop. And from that vantage point, you can see where the Shabasquaya joins the Greenmantle. And for some reason, they call it the Shabasquaya from that point, although I thought the Greenmantle was a bigger body of water and it should have carried the name. But from that point down, it's called the Shabasquaya. Well, we went from log jams to whitewater. From the confluence down, the river drops into a long run of twisting C1s and C2s, all very manageable and a lot of fun, but it kind of keeps you on your toes as you're working your way down. And then after we got through that series, we came out of Patty Lake, which I had been to before. There's a campsite there. There's actually a little picnic table on a sand beach. And if you've never been on the Upper Albany, it is just a beautiful, glorious river. There are some pretty good sized waterfalls. There's lots of runs. There's actually 3 waterfalls or full waterfalls in there and some great runs. It's just a beautiful stretch of river. Well worth the trip just to get on the Albany. And I've been very fortunate. I've been on it 3 different times. And I've always really enjoyed particularly this stretch. And eventually we went out on the lake. Now on the way, we saw something that's kind of cool for an Iowan. We saw elm trees. And to our knowledge, this is the furthest point north in Wabakimi where elms can be found. We happen to have a botanist from the University of Iowa with us. That's Ray. He picked up on this real quick and we noted it and shared it with the park naturalists. And to our knowledge, it's the furthest point north, at least in the park, that you find elm trees, which I find kind of interesting that they're even there. So for a bunch of Iowa folks, that's kind of cool to see an elm tree. And we finally ended our village at the chapel, which is kind of cool. This is the 3rd time I've been there on different trips. And what gets me is, this chapel's relatively new. August of 1984 when it was dedicated. And it's in use. The collection tray has money in it. It looks like people are out there. It's a very remote location, but it's a great place to end a trip because there's actually a place where a plane can land. You can load. And then we went back home from there after 75 miles. And I think it was 10 or 12 days. So that was our trip home. Everybody appreciates that sound of a float plane coming in. If you haven't done it, and I know this group has, it's something everybody should do at some point in their life. Now, bear with me here. I've got a little video that kind of tells the story of this trip. Hank, where are we at, Hank?
Well, let's see. We're starting our first portage where there is no portage. We're at the east end of Greenmantle Lake. Day two. Day two of a 10-day trip into the unknown.
And this is what we're seeing.
A little bit of running water, but not enough to paddle.
And this is what our trail looks like. And we're not here to clear portage. We're just going to get enough of an opening that we can get through it. But you ready for this, Hank?
Another excellent adventure, Vern.
Here we go. And what do you think of the Greenmantle so far?
I think all you gotta do is look up and see that babbling brook and see that part of the Greenmantle and say, this is gonna be a lot of fun.
Are you having fun so far?
Oh, heck yes.
All right, you're my kind of paddler. Go. Hey Dan, where are we at and what just happened?
We had a quick encounter with a good-sized bear right after the oxbow that you had on the map.
How big was the bear, Dan?
It looked really big.
How close was the bear,
Because
Dan?
it was too close.
What's Ray doing?
Ray is cutting off a log of mooney.
Yeah. How many of these have we cut off today?
Yeah, we got a couple, huh?
Yeah, a couple, yeah. Not as big as this one, though. So Ray, what'd you think of that chute liner wade back there?
Which one? Whole mouth.
The whole mess.
Variety is the spice of life. That's slow now. Please.
Very nice. Wave at the camera. Ray, you look awful comfortable. What have you been doing all day?
Paddling.
Where have you been paddling?
We came down the rest of the Greenmantle to the confluence with Chabwasquia River.
What do you think of the Greenmantle?
Love it.
What do you like about it?
It's a fairly, it doesn't have a lot of volume, so the rapids are interesting, but not super pushy.
What don't you like about it?
What's not to like?
Okay, there you are. Thank you.
Straight ahead, straight ahead. Right there, right there. Very nice. Very nice.
Smooth. Boreal wave.
What's the word? So Ray, what's the boreal wave?
Boreal wave.
I get it.
Very nice. Well done. That was complicated. Well, if I could, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Friends of Wabakimi briefly, and then we'll take questions. Friends of Wabakimi, our vision, Wabakimi area will be an exceptional destination for wilderness recreation activities for future and present. And through volunteer stewardship initiatives and collaboration, we want to participate in the planning process and be advocates for the protection and preservation of the diverse cultural and historical resources of the Wabakimi area. So that's kind of what we are as a mission. So your organization is very broad. We're very specific, although we're both doing wilderness paddling. But we want it to be an exceptional destination. The Friends, we have a website, and there's where you need to go and look. You're actually on this presentation is actually on our website tonight, so we're doing this in partnership with you. But we want to help you plan your trip. And we have a planning map, which I've already kind of shared with you. And that's available. It's actually produced by Go Trekkers out of Saskatchewan. And you can go to our website and get a copy of it. We also have canoe route maps. And I've already kind of shared this with you. The original maps that were put together were based on zones. And the challenge is it's not a route. These aren't route maps. They're just zone maps. And so you got to count, if you're going to cross the park, you may have to have 3 or 4 of these to create a trip. And that system is a little awkward. So what we did is we teamed up with Lawrence Mills, who makes route maps, and his organization was wabakimimaps.com. So basically what he's doing now is taking the information that we have gathered in our zone maps and putting them into route maps. And this is an example one. This is Allenwater River. And so we've partnered with Lawrence, and his maps are available on our website. You can actually get the 5 volumes if you want, or you can get a specific route, both available on our website. Obviously, the park has its own materials, which provides a lot of important information about planning a trip. But we felt it was more important to have a guide just written for the park. And we did this again with Lawrence. He had a lot of expertise in maps in that area. And so he was a logical guy to write it. Provides a list of primary canoe routes, the details you need to plan your own trip. And it will supplement the planning map, the 5 canoe route volumes, and the park map. And so this is also available on our website, and we're very proud of this document. The Friends also put on a webinar series very similar to what you're doing. We've already done 2 of them this year. And lo and behold, we're taking credit for this one, but tomorrow night we actually have the assistant park superintendent that will be doing a presentation on the canoe rangers, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. We're helping fund that. We're also going to have the park superintendent next Sunday talking about the fires of 2023, which really impacted the western part of the park. Another initiative that we're involved in is a woodland caribou survey project, and we'll be doing a presentation on that in February. And the iNaturalist process is also another way for community scientists to gather information that is valuable to research scientists. And so we'll be doing that in March. Our fundraising this year, the park was hit by a pretty major fire. 10% of the west side of the park was burnt, basically the Flint River system. And their rangers are going to have a big job clearing that. So what we did as an organization is we raised money to basically add another 36 ranger working days to their spring and summer operating schedule to help clear trails impacted by that fire. We also raised a chunk of money to pay to have the big planes, the big otters, fly debris out of Shabasquale Lake. We actually completed our fundraising goal on December 10th. We raised over $10,000 for the debris removal and to add park ranger capacity. And then we're on to another project. We're going to be working to help develop and gain more information in the woodland caribou in the park and the surrounding crown land. We actually, that's part of the seminar, webinar we're doing on February 18th. We've actually applied for a caribou conservation stewardship program grant, and the purpose of those grants are support projects that contribute to the stewardship and the recovery of Ontario's caribou populations. We've actually asked for over $400,000, which will allow us to put crews out into the areas where historically the caribou were calving. And what we're going to try to do is determine, are they still using those areas? What areas do they use? What areas are not being used? And then use that information to help support and maybe help with the recovery of caribou in that part of Ontario. We also have a Friends meeting coming up here real soon. It's actually going to be in Southern Ontario at the Toronto Outdoor Adventure Show, which is at the International Center. You're familiar with it. I've been there once. It's a monstrously big space. And so that will be on Sunday morning, February 25th, 10:30 to 11:30. It's in room 509, which is a challenge to find. It's also going to be on Zoom. So that's our meeting, but we're also hoping to have a social gathering on Saturday night, the 24th, 6 to 9. We haven't got this worked out, so don't hold me to it. We actually haven't reserved the space, but our goal is to have a social gathering at the Holiday Inn, which is pretty close to the International Center. So if you're a member, we'd really love to have you come to our meeting if you're going to be at the Outdoor Adventure Show. I know your program is on that Saturday, but hopefully we can get you to come over on Sunday and join us for our membership meeting. With that, I want to open it up and take your questions. And so I'm going to stop sharing.
Well, thanks very much, Vern. Yeah, we'll go into open. So whoever's got a question, I saw a few comments in the chat. Not really a question, more of statements that I did in the Wabakimi in 1996. I've done a trip from Armstrong, etc. So whoever's got a question, just unmute yourself and ask your question, I guess.
Hi, Dave Skinner here. I understand that Bruce is selling the lodge in Wabakimi.
Well, Bruce Heyer, one minute he's planning his funeral, and the next minute he's working on his business plan for the next 5 years. Yes, I think he would like to get out of the business. His son is not interested in taking the business. We've talked to him about a possible partnership, which we couldn't figure out a business model that would work for both of us. So yeah, Bruce is seriously looking at moving on to retirement. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. And the challenge with that is Don Elliott is also reaching that point in life and where he would like to retire. And those are the two outfitters in Armstrong. If both of those move on and can't find somebody to sell the business to, it's going to be really hard to plan a trip because that's basically those two outfitters are the gateway out of Armstrong. And if you don't have them to provide support services, that huge wilderness area is going to be hard to access. So yes, you are correct. I don't have a definite date, but he's ready to step aside, but I'm not sure anybody's willing to step in.
Okay, while we're waiting for JB, we did a trip where we went in by the rail to Allen. Where we go? Allen Water, I guess, and then up and around in Kopka River, and we ended up at the bottom of Kopka River where it almost intersects the highway there. And
Right.
it was like a lodge or something. I don't know if you know that person, but they did a little shuttle service for us.
Well, it's either Alan Cheeseman, Bruce Heyer, or Don Elliott. Those are your three outfitters that are in that neck of the woods that would,
Right.
Yeah, because you come out on 527,
Yeah.
and you're just down the road from Armstrong at that point.
Yeah, we're maybe 20 clicks down the road.
Yeah, not very far.
And it wasn't far where we parked our cars at his lodge and they shuttled us or something. And then we went back up to Armstrong and I don't know what we did, went to the restaurant or something. But yeah, that was a good route because the rail in, you drop off on the line and that was one of the maps you showed, the Allen Bridge going north.
Right. Right. Yeah, the park is kind of special because you can get on the train from east or west, and there are multiple access points that you can get in and get off. And that whole train thing is unique. There aren't very many places where you can use a train to access a wilderness area.
Yeah.
So,
So you can get off anywhere. You just tell them
well,
the
yeah,
mile
there
marker.
are designated points, and
Yeah.
that guidebook I showed you, it talks about where those points are. You got to coordinate with them. I got to be honest, that's on my bucket list. In fact, I plan to do that this spring. I've never done a train trip, so I can't speak from expertise or experience. But I think if you got to communicate with the engineer where you want to get off. They have mile points, and you got to get off of those mile points. But
Yeah.
there's more than one spot where you can get off and start a trip.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, we got off at Allen Water, which there's a little bridge. And then, but there was, when we went north like, I don't know, 50K, came back down. The whole route was about 225 in 20 some days. And we crossed the tracks again at Beagle Lake or something like that, it was called.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember the names anymore. It's been about 5 years, but yeah, so every time you cross the tracks, basically it's you could flag down the train. I would say there was some designated, and there was a lot of stops. This train just stops in the middle of nowhere. You see nothing, and all of a sudden, all these people come out of the woods.
Yep,
They're
and get on the
collecting
train.
whatever, and then they disappear into the woods again. You
Yep.
don't even see a trail almost, but it's just
Right.
a cabin out there somewhere, and it's really amazing.
Well, and Bruce Heyer, he has an outpost cabin at one of those train stops. So that's a whole nother piece is, starting in the trip at one of those outpost cabins that accesses the railroad. So that's a whole nother piece. I think it's just, like I said, I haven't done it. It's on my bucket list. But it's just a whole nother way to experience that huge wilderness complex.
Yeah. And I've experienced the blazes. That's one thing is you do a route, it's not like a sign. You're kind of looking in an area. And I remember when we were going south, so we're under the tracks now, that Beagle Lakes there, and we're heading to the Kopka River. And we had about 2 or 3K of just going through a marshland. Actually was dried out grass, but you just got to kind of point yourself and normally carry just a load so you can figure out where the water is. And then you come back for your boat or whatever. And it was neat. It was, but you could see the blazes, every so often.
Yeah, and a lot of them are historical.
Historical.
And I don't know that the park staff makes a great effort to mark those routes. And so you really got to get inside the mind of the voyager that went before you and go, where would I go? And then start looking for a route. And some of these routes are used so infrequently that they're just not much evidence of foot traffic on them. So you got to really kind of bring a saw and think your way through it. And again, they have a very small number of portage crews. They and again, the assistant superintendent is going to talk about that tomorrow night. But there may only be 1 or 2 canoes out there for a summer, and obviously they're not going to get all those routes. They may get to a route every 3 to 5 years, maybe, and there's just some routes that they don't get to. So to me, that's part of the romance. It makes a kind of a real wilderness area in the sense that there's nobody maintaining a path for you. So you got to come prepared for that.
Yeah, it's a different experience. I know when we were out there, we ran into one of your crews. This is 2018. Maybe 3 or 4 guys, and they were talking about, well, at the time, this is 2018, they said, yeah, who was your original founder who died?
Phil Cotton was
Phil
a music
Cotton,
teacher at Thunder Bay.
Yeah. So at that point, I believe he died. And
correct. He died in the spring of 18. That's correct.
Yeah. And I believe they were saying, yeah, this is possibly the last year, et cetera. But I'm glad you guys kept going. Excellent.
Well, Phil's vision for the future, because I remember sitting in a tent asking him, when you're not here, who's going to come out and do this? And he goes, well, my goal is to create a Friends of organization, and that will be how my legacy is carried forward. So he created the Friends in 2014, And then after he passed, we sort of kind of regrouped and got together. We don't have the capacity to organize like he did and send crews out there. So we're trying to help and improve the park in other ways. And again, we're raising money to send crews out and do the work. But that's been a challenge because what Phil did was remarkable. He organized a lot of people and got them into the backcountry. And as a bunch of volunteers, we just don't have that capacity. So we're trying to carry on Phil's legacy, but in a slightly different approach.
Yeah. I think one of the things I'm always impressed with is, you're making the maps, and that's what gets people out there. The same with our organization. We've been in existence 50 years, and people that retire, they just give us everything from the 50 years of them paddling. So when you're a member with the WCA, well, first of all, we own my CCR, which is my canoe routes, Canadian Canoe Routes, and that's all free for the public. You put stuff in, you take stuff out. But the added advantage of being a WCA member is we have this map librarian who's on the call actually, and he's collecting all this information from people, logbooks, maps, whatever. We're trying to digitize it all. And the idea is when you're a WCA member, you can go to the map librarian and say, I want to go to Wabakimi. And he's got a big wad of stuff, and he'll say, okay, what area? And he'll forward that information to you by post, the real copies of the maps and the trip logs. And then your idea as a member, you take it, you copy everything, and about 3-4 weeks later, you send it back to him. The idea now is we're going to digitize the whole thing, so it's all going to be done electronically, kind of thing. But that is an advantage, not just to have the map, but like, for instance, I was there 5 years ago. So I've got a route. I got the GPS. I got the knowledge. That member can talk to me or anybody else who's done it. And the map librarian slowly learns who did what in the last 5-10 years. And you connect all the dots. So now a member has a huge advantage. You can talk literally to the person who just did it a couple of years before. And he knows the shuttle, he knows where to go, he knows the train, he knows the airplane, he knows the road, he knows there's a big log jam, he knows, everything.
Well, and as I listen to you talk, Gary, we're overlapping because
Yeah,
Lawrence
we are.
Mills is our librarian, and our maps are digitized,
Yeah.
and we are upgrading them on a regular basis. In fact, I know you can't see this, but we actually have little guidebooks that we ask people, trip report books, fill out, and so that we can do the same thing you're saying, which is
Yep.
figure out where the changes are, what's wrong on the maps, what's right on the maps. And so we're doing that on a very focused area, and probably should be looking at how we can consolidate our efforts rather than running parallel, because we're kind of doing the same thing, it sounds like.
Yeah, you're definitely specific. We're broad. We're like every which way.
Correct.
Um,
Correct.
But one of the things you'll realize is, like, the minute we have this presentation, or you'll have your presentation, and you put it on YouTube, the next few years, everybody's doing that river. We've had, we've done like stuff in the Yukon. All of a sudden, 2-3 years, everybody's doing it because they saw it on YouTube. And when we post stuff, we're really detailed about what we're posting. So we're all about connecting the dots with people. And I love the presentation you gave today because it's like perfect for us, and hopefully it helps you too. One of the things we can offer, those Zoom presentations, we can take that information and give you, get the Zoom address. And Chris actually is our communications director. So every month, or just before the end of the month, he'll put out a monthly what's coming next, like presentations and whatever. And we actually put presentations from other clubs. One of the clubs is the Ottawa Club, who just sent us a pile of presentations they're going to do in the next few weeks, sorry. And we're going to post them. So we're all about connecting clubs and dots and whatever, trying to be very cooperative with everybody. So we're willing to take your information and put on social media or in our listing, and then people will join. We've had cooperations with clubs from Alberta, Ottawa, Des Moines River. So all these CPAWs, we're into all that stuff that, we like to connect all the dots with people.
Well, and Gary, as we talked offline before the program, one of the things I would like to figure out if we could do it is to tie our annual meeting into one of your presentations, so that, because I'm going to guess a big chunk of our membership is also overlapping into your group. And I think we would have a much higher response to our general meeting if we could overlap and tie the two together. So we don't need to work out those details here and now, but I would like to take advantage of that opportunity and have a discussion to see if we could maybe next year or somewhere out in the future have our general membership meeting at the same time or in the same location where you have where you do your presentations. Because right now we're going to be over at the International Center, and you're going to be doing yours on the same weekend. And I'm going to guess it might make it hard for some of our members that are in both organizations to be in both places. So love to be able to coordinate that so that we can take advantage of our overlap.
Yeah, that's our symposium, which is kind of a sister organization, run all by basically 100% WCA people, as I mentioned yesterday. Anyways, we're kind of monopolizing. Does anybody else have any other questions for Vern?
Vern, what's your just a question here, it's Eric Thompson. What's your favorite route in Wabakimi?
Well, I mentioned the Albany, and that is just an incredible route. If you've never come off of Rogers Point and worked your way down, I strongly enjoyed the Albany. I gotta be honest, the Gull River, which is at the other end, it's at the south end. There's something like 38 little drops in the Gull, and they're all manageable. But it was just drop after drop after drop after drop, and there aren't that many people that run the Gull. And so, you know, from the north end, the Albany, at the south end, the Gull, and then probably the most torturous route I've ever done is the Outer Tooth Canyon. And it took us 3 days, parts of 3 days, to go less than 5 miles. That was incredible, but the scenery was incredible. So you got such a range of habitats and skill levels, and big lakes and small waterways and heavy whitewater and big waterfalls. It's got a little bit of everything there. And so, but I got to admit, the Albany, that was, be real honest, was one of my first northern rivers. And that upper Albany is just glorious. And I have very fond memories of trying to figure out how we're going to get from A to B and get home alive.
Is the Albany a fairly silty river, or is it?
I thought it was pretty clean running as far as I could tell.
Awesome.
It has a dam upstream, and so you got to be aware that water levels can change dramatically depending on what they're holding and when they release, and that's a whole nother. You could be out there and all of a sudden you got a wall of water coming at you. So and I don't know how you coordinate all that, but my 3 times on it, I have fond memories of it.
Awesome. Are your trip photos available anywhere on the internet for those who'd like to see more?
Most of my trip reports are posted either at wabakimi.com or on canoeing.com. And so there's a lot, and most of my webinar presentations are also on our wabakimi.com website. So a lot of that information is there. And again, if you go to either one of them, and I have to laugh, many years ago, I did a trip on the Pipestone, took a photograph of a big esker, and now that's used all over the internet as an example of an esker. And if you pull up esker, you'll see Jerry Storm paddling in front of a big pile of sand. And so I've got stuff scattered around that I don't get credit for anymore. I'm just sure you all deal with that too. You post something somewhere, and the next thing you know, it's used by the world. But I have, again, my reports are on canoeing.com and wabakimi.com. So a lot of those images are there, and some of the webinars that I've done are also posted there.
All right. One last call for questions. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I'd like to thank.
Somebody else asked about the. Sorry, just reading in the chat. Someone else asked about what were the flight costs?
Over the years, and the distance is variable. I'm just gonna throw out kind of a random number here, and this is maybe sort of an average, but like $500 one way. And those numbers change. Many years ago, I did a trip up on the Winis River all the way up to Hudson Bay. And I remember the four of us wrote a check for $10,000 to fly in and out of Pickle Lake to do that trip. So flight costs range from anywhere from a few $100s to a few $1,000s, depending on the distance. Greenmantle is not that far away from Armstrong, so that's not an overwhelming trip to plug in, but that's a stumbling block for a lot of people. Those it costs money to get in a plane. You got to take that into consideration, particularly if you're going both ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, generally what happens is you have to divide up the cost with your partners, so it doesn't come out over the top. The most expensive flight I had was up in the Firth, which is the top northwest corner of the Yukon. It was $7,500 a flight. We needed 3 flights in and 2.5 flights out. So it came out to would have been 45,000 total, but we had 15 people. So it works out at the end of the day, it was 42.5 because we shared a half flight out with some other group coming out. Worked out about $3,000 each, but that was a trip that's very remote, hour and a half each way. Other flights, like when we do the Yukon area, Mayo up, it's maybe 5,000 to 7,000, but again, you're dividing by 6, each flight. So it's very random. You have to figure out where you're going, and usually there's only one airline in that area servicing that area. So you're kind of, whatever the cost is, that's what it is,
Well, I think the beauty of Wabakimi is that you've got a huge wilderness area, which has a very short hop for a flight. So if you're going to do a flight, that's a great place to do it because that's about as cheap as you're going to get.
Yeah.
And everybody should get in an otter at least once in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, Beaver, Otter, they're all fun airplanes, or a twin otter. One of the things I was mentioning, I did the Bud car in, that was super cheap. Under $100 or something one way, and it's like a 45 minutes one way in or something. So, if you can do a train thing, like a Bud car kind of thing. So there's other rivers in our area, neck of the woods, Spanish and places like that, White River. That's the way to go. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks everybody, and thanks Vern. It was excellent. Like I mentioned, Vern, if you can send me some info on your upcoming presentations, we'll definitely send it to our members, and you'll probably get a few members joining.
Cool.
We're always into that.
The other thing I'll do, Gary, is I'll give you my email address, and if everybody wants to follow up, I'm more than happy to have comment. Oh, and I'm always looking for paddling partners. So
you know what you can do? You could just type it in the chat right now, and people can grab it.
Okay.
That's the best way to do it. Now, if you're interested, I could put it on the back of the video. So if they want to contact you, just put some contact information. And it's going to be on the World Wide Web. So whatever you put, be prepared to comments.
My email's everywhere anyway. So
there you go. Yeah, I have the same thing. Okay, well, thanks very much, everybody. We'll call it a night. And in a few days, I'll put this on the WCA YouTube channel. If anybody's interested in joining our club, check out our website, and you go through all the pages. You can see what we're all about. All right.
Gary.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Sorry, the very last minute, but I'm sort of making pasta sauce and listening on at the same time. Just thinking about the Albany. I did it from the source down to the Canogamy and then up the Canogamy a couple of days about, I don't know, 35 years ago now, but we were able to get off the train east of Savant Lake. We didn't have to go to the station. They let us off. My guide knew the route. So there's a little lake. I think it was Hall's Lake. If John Berger is still there, he'll know. And then we worked our way up to the Albany, then down the Albany, re-outfitted at Abamet Lake, Abamet First Nation there, and then continued on and then cut down through the river systems back to Auden, where we had left the vehicles. So the thing is, it just takes time, right? So if you can't afford to fly, if you have time, there's still so many lovely ways to access that river. And it's honestly, it's just such a beautiful river. Beautiful, beautiful trip that was. We were 42 days from base camp in North Bay and then back to North Bay.
Was
So
this when you were in a camp
no,
as a camper? No.
no, it was as an adult with a dear friend who actually was a former partner of John Berger's,
Okay.
Andy Smith, who came up through the camps, but like he's 85 now.
Yeah.
And so he, you know, but he had come through the camps and then set up his own business, which was called Wilderness Way. And my daughter at 17 did the same river with him. And I think he might have been 70 then. He was the guide.
Yeah.
Amazing guy. But anyway, they did fly out, but if you paddle 2 days up the Kanogami to Mamamatawa, you can fly out from there. We paddled out, but she flew out. But and a little current just south of there is another really nice trip, and it also flows into the Kanogami. And again, you can access it without flying in, but we did fly out from the Kanogami.
Well, it's interesting, you know, just your discussion there. We do have members do presentations on trips where you just, like, I know there's a few members in the audience here where we just pick a subject, blood vein or whatever. And they do a little presentation just on, like, just like you did, Vern, but, you know, on other aspects. That's a popular thing also, because again, like I said, you do a presentation, you put on the internet, everybody starts doing that river in the next couple of years. Especially when you have those kind of details, Jen, about, you know, where to go, what to do, is an alternative to flying in.
Well, my daughter did it in the highest water in 50 years, where, you know, the campsites are underwater, and there you have to use alternative.
You're floating and you see the rocks below. Yeah.
Oh, so she'd have some interesting information on it, but yeah.
You know, it was interesting when I did the trip in 2018. My daughter did it in about maybe 2010 to 11, 12, something like this. And I remember when she came back, so she was in a camp, she was 15 years old, 15, 16. She was just a camper, and she did 535-kilometer X pattern. So Wabakimi, as you said, how big it is, she went double the height, double the width. And I was just doing the GPS with her, like, for 2 nights. We did the GPS, and it came out doing the GPS 535. So you know it's going to be 10-15% more than that. And they were out there 36 days.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my daughter did 36.
Epic, you know, 2 airdrops of food.
2 airdrops, yeah.
So
lovely.
when we did the Wabakimi, she knew quite a bit of the area we were going, and she said, "Don't go there, go here, go. You have to go to Kopka, you know, the waterfalls." She knew, like, all the bits, you know. And that's what you need. You need people, even though she was 15, 16 at the time. You need people that have gone and tell the story, right?
Yeah, and people who are, you know, aren't just sort of along for the ride on these camp expeditions. They're really paying attention and engaging and registering in their minds and their little souls what they're seeing and experiencing.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing the GPS, believe it or not, I was doing it on the map. You know, I see the map with a satellite, and she says, "No, Dad, on this side of the island." So she would remember a specific thing in the 535.
Isn't that great?
No, drag that over here. You're
That's
going
amazing.
alongside the island.
Oh, good for her.
Okay. So a very detailed person on maps.
I love it. I love it. Well, anyway.
Anyways, okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Vern, and everybody else that had good questions. And we'll see you on the internet.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.